You tuned into Inspired Afternoons. I was going to say educational insights, but that's a little later. It's Inspired Afternoons, and here to inspire us to become a better version of ourselves and our wholesome, all-round well-being is psychologist and happiness coach Razia Sulliman. So let's welcome Razia Sulliman to the program. Sister Razia, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Inspired Afternoons.
Walaikum salam.
And before we go any further, let me tell you, you're speaking to Mariam Mia. I love helping people. I think of myself as a community activist because if things are not working in the community, instead of moaning about it, I'd like to be the solution to the problem to see how can we get it fixed. And if somebody is in need, whether it's family, friend, community member, I like to get involved and see how can I network and get people together to sort things out. And yes, I just like to make things happen and get people together and network. So that's who Mariam Mia is, and this is at the back of the homework you gave me last week in terms of introduce yourself without you, who you are as a career or define you materially or that. So I thought about it. I hope that was an adequate introduction and insight into my character of Mariam Mia.
It was. Was it difficult to do?
Uh, you know what? In some parts, every time I had to, divorcing my career persona as well as just looking at character, it was difficult to divorce it. But once I got into it, I decided, and then it started flowing, and I love having conversations to people with people. So, may talkative and gregarious can also get into there
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So then it wasn't difficult, and yes, uh, I actually had, you know what? It made me look at myself in a different way in who I am. So it made me search differently into my personality and my character.
So I am very glad that you were able to do it. And that there was also an understanding that it's not always easy to define ourselves by who we are and not necessarily what we do. The initial struggle that you had, a lot of people have. So this week, I thought that maybe we uncover why people struggle with looking at themselves from a personality perspective versus what they do in their day-to-day lives, and how we become so associated with what we've achieved or our jobs instead of the internal us. So for this week, I was thinking that maybe we look at ego versus identity.
And
And
yes, 100%. Because,
yes,
I couldn't quite understand what you were getting at the root. You're taking ego by identity. But now that you're speaking, me being, for example, a presenter on Salam Media is part of my ego because where I go around, somebody will say, "Oh, aren't you the presenter of the?" Well, I'm getting that quite a bit now. And yes, it adds to your ego because now people are recognizing you. And
mm,
now it's becoming easy for me to say, "Oh, I'm Mariam Mia, presenter of Inspired Afternoon." And it gives me an ego. I'm being honest here. It's an honesty session. Yes, I'm being honest. And that's what I mean, that ego, you're discussing your ego in terms of your career has been so linked to who you are that it just evolves into your identity. And they
yes.
are two separate entities, so to speak. That's what you're telling us.
Mm. So when we touched on it last week, I also mentioned that in order to do the happiness coaching, we look at different layers. Last week, we looked at subconscious beliefs briefly. We also looked at the internal versus the external, which was then the homework that was assigned. And that is two of the layers. The third layer is identity. And it stems from what we've just spoken about. And the reality of it is that the tendency that we have to link who we are to what we do or what we've achieved is just like you said now. There is a bit of it feeds into the ego, but also it becomes normal for us to do this. It becomes something that we do every day because this is our norm. And then we ask the question, but why? And the simple answer is ego or identity. And having the reality of it is, we live in a society that has dictated to us that having a big ego or being egotistical is wrong. And they are right. Being humble and not being egotistical or boastful is a good quality to have. But then there's also the saying that a humble person doesn't say that they're humble. And as a result, we tend to shy away from our good qualities because that's your opinion of yourself. It's not factually based. So we then move towards how messages are given to us sometimes is not interpreted or internalized in the way that it was intended. Sometimes we internalize a message completely differently, and it has a long-term effect on how we live our lives. So when we then go into looking at introducing ourselves and saying that actually I'm a very good person, some people feel like they are bragging or they are being boastful instead of representing the facts. Now, saying that I studied psychology, that I have an honors degree, saying that I work in HR, those are facts. I'm not bragging. I'm not being boastful. I've introduced myself based on the facts at hand. But the moment we start digging into our personalities and who we are, it sort of feels like you're bragging about who you are. So people tend to shy away from it because we are not meant to be egotistical or boastful. And that is how we then tie our identity. In the longer run, it becomes part of a relationship. And whether that relationship be with your education, with your career, with a partner, with your children, that is what you become identified with. So you introduce yourself later as I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, whatever that relationship is. And what tends to happen is you lose yourself in that relationship, and that's what you become. And you lose who you are whilst you are living in that relationship completely.
Okay, so now, like you say, those affects your psychologist, your Razia, who's a happiness coach. How do you convey that without being egotistical and singing, waxing lyrical of all your achievements and that? Because how do you do that? And is it okay? Should we be comfortable in what we did? It's achievements, but it's also fact. Do we be comfortable, or when do you introduce this in the conversation as well? Yeah, I have a problem in terms of, like you say, when I become somebody's wife or somebody's mother or a granny, now there I am, because I feel that's when I lose myself, because then I'm seen as a mother, and somehow a mother see, I don't know why this connotation with just being that mom, because for me a stay-at-home mom is one of the most difficult chores in the world. I don't know if you've been there. I've been there at
I
one
have.
time. Yes, so at one time, for a good 2 or 3 years, I was just a stay-at-home mom. I was studying while I took the opportunity to further my studies while I stayed at home. But really, it was the most challenging, difficult time. It's the most difficult job to be a stay-at-home mom. But I don't know why there's such a negative connotation, or you're
Very
not
patient.
and also, you're not a productive member of society if you're just a stay at home mom. Why such a stigma in terms of that identity? Because there are many at home moms listening, and they feel, there's no value. As soon as they introduce themselves as I'm a stay at home mom, it's, oh, you're not doing, you're like nobody. Why is that stigma?
So I think the stigma comes again from what society has taught us. You contribute to society by doing something. So it's not wrong in terms of that, or let's rather put it this way: when you are raising children, you're raising members of society. And I think
Absolutely.
that's a fact that gets withdrawn from the conversation. So when you're talking about being a stay-at-home mom, there's a negative connotation towards it, because you are not actively contributing towards an economy. You are not actively contributing towards taxes or returns, or from a return on investment point of view, you haven't put in anything into this world that we're living in. But what you are putting in is an investment. You're raising children that will contribute. And if you are at home all the time raising your children, they probably have better guidelines in terms of right and wrong. They have better guidelines in terms of culture and religion and ethics that they should live up to, because as a mother, you're constantly there to reinforce that rule, which means you're probably raising a very strong child that gets to know exactly who they are in a society that tends to oftentimes associate us with what we do. So you're in a position to raise your child to be comfortable with who they are, not necessarily what they do. And that is your investment in society. That's your contribution to society, is having put all of that effort into raising your child. The negative connotation is society's understanding of what a contributing member of society is. And it is us challenging that view. So when you feel that negative connotation, it is a mother at home answering, and not keeping quiet, because what you are doing is contributing to society. And if that is tied into exactly who you are, then you should be standing up for that person.
Yes, so that's what I would say. How do we change that perception about at some point of your life, many women make that a conscious decision that, you know what, I'm going to take a break from the working world. I want to be that stay at home mom to just give my children that grounding, that balance. And also, you know what, from my experience coming from a childhood development specialist, I see that happiness or that security when your child sees you coming and fetching you from school. Even if you're working mom in the day, you're not working or you're on leave or you're at a meeting and you could manage to fetch your child, you in the vicinity, that smile or that excitement your child sees when you come and fetch them is priceless. I mean, I run a early childhood development program, and when I see when the dads come and fetch the children, they're so happy to see their daddy not at work and coming to fetch them, and it's so tangible. And that feeling of security helps in terms of their self-esteem and who they are. So while we might discount that, you're not, yes, you're investing in getting grounded, all-round well-being children. It's not easy. They're still going to have their challenges going through the
Yes.
motions. You're still going to have that difficult teenager you're going to deal with. But behind that, they only realize afterwards the pillar of strength that you do when you decide to work from home, or that so that you can be part of your child's life. So how do we change that narrative, in terms of letting society see the value of, and it's not so much even a stay-at-home mom, but one parent elects to be around or work flexi hours so they can do this, doing the school run, coming home, giving a nice lunch, getting ready for the afternoon extramurals or whatever it is. But there is one parent that's available to the children to do this. How do we change that narrative?
Changing a narrative and a perception is very difficult, especially if it's as widespread as this particular one. And when it comes to that, the responsibility is on each parent, mother and father, the one at home or the one not at home, to speak up for what you are putting into society. Because, like you said, there's that excitement in that child. Every child will have their obstacles and they'll have their challenges, but at the end of the day, being at home, you're raising a much healthier, emotionally healthier child, that feels loved and supported all the time. You're also raising a child that knows who they are, because, like I said, you're raising a child that it has the constant of the ethics and the values that are constantly there. It is not a change because there's a new nanny or because there's a new daycare or because there's a new. It is a constant parent that is leading the ethics and values that they live every day, and that's what they teach their children. Um, and I speak from this sort of from experience, because as much as my mother was a working mother, she made sure that she was at home when we got from school. She spent 3 hours with us. And the values that were installed in us are values that we carry as adults with us today. And the children she raised are all contributing members of society. And those are the kind of things that the children, the parents, we all need to start speaking out and saying, but this is what comes from a mother who invests in her children, or a father who invests in his children. I think once everybody starts speaking out, we have a chance at changing the perception. But that's something that we all need to do together. It's not something that changes by itself very quickly.
And I was just thinking, so couples, prospective couples who intend to marry now, should this be part of, the premarital counseling or conversations that should be happen, that when we have children, maybe I'll take a year or two from my career to be the stay-at-home parent for this time, and then once I go back into the workplace, you need to make a plan to make yourself available, flexi time. So should there be the so at during the children's childhood, there is at least one parent at home that's working flexi time. Should this be conversations that young couples should be discussing in pre-marriage counsel, or conversations before they get married with each other? I don't know. As a coach,
Definitely.
what do you feel?
Definitely. The reality of it is, and this is something that I found, is a child with a strong identity tends to not lose themselves in the relationships of the world or society. They tend to know exactly who they are. So this bigger culture that drives us doesn't influence your children as much. And I think it's definitely important that young couples looking to embark on parenting, getting married, these are conversations they should have before they enter into that relationship. Because having a child that knows exactly who they are also means you'll have a child that's happy always. For me, self discovery is the first path to happiness. And unfortunately, we now live in a society where adults have to look back and reflect to find out who they are. And that is because we are the product of 80% of working mothers and fathers. A lot of people have lost themselves in that environment. So very important, I think, that you should have that kind of conversation, to have a constant parent that's there. Flexi time is now becoming more and more of a real option, especially in the times that we are now. So it's something that we can definitely look at doing, and a conversation that must happen.
um, for me, that's one of the silver linings of the COVID is when most corporates were working from home, and research shows that there was increased productivity because people were actually working longer hours, working in the evenings. So they're balancing. Okay, so I'm busy. I'm gonna support my child with online schooling now at this time here in the morning. Thereafter, I'm gonna work. I remember my brother telling me once he started a meeting with his colleagues at 10 p.m. And before they all realized it was 1 p.m. And they just worked and they worked and they worked and the project got sorted out. They didn't even realize. But he said, ah, you know what? I'm going to be at 2. Tomorrow I can sleep until about 10 and then we'll start in the afternoon. So I think that it gave management and I think executives at corporate level to say, you know what, our staff, if they work from home in flexi time, they will work because
Yes.
it's proven that things are going
Mm,
to get done. They still, in fact, it bucked the trend to say those that were working at home were actually more productive and more dedicated. And for all those who are working at home, I hear all of you telling me I'm working a lot more. Sometimes after supper, I'm still attending to queries, to emails, to this. So it showed you that, yes, we can change. We can be at home, have our cake and eat it. That means check on our children, be there for them, but yet contribute where we can in terms of where it allows us to work from home and we don't need a physical space to work. You can elect to work and have both parents working have home office. So for me, I think that was the positive of one of the positives, the silver lining of the stay at home.
of COVID.
Mhm.
Definitely. Also, it's not only that it's shown that people have been more productive, but what has also come out of it is a lot of corporates are now advertising work from home positions. There are a lot more positions that are opening up that say work from home. So there's no more, for a lot of companies, the office based requirement is reducing substantially, which allows that opportunity for parents to be at home with their children to make sure that the foundation is laid for the children. Yes.
And I think many parents can, so they have options now. And one of these options here, because as you said, for me, you said something very telling to say we are now in our adulthoods and sometimes even late adulthood, we are in a journey of self-discovery. That's exactly why we're having this discussing our ego and questioning our subconscious belief system is because, as you said, we most people like you said 80% are product of working parents, and look, they work, not we're not judging them, they work because they have to put food on the table, to send us to
Exactly.
school, to clothe us,
Mm,
feed us, but like you say, the trade-off was many confused adults out there, many adults that are looking now for
yes.
happiness. They're looking for a better understanding of who they are. They having many challenges in the adult years, and part of it was because they didn't have that security and support to build a positive self-esteem in their childhood and teenagers.
Correct. That's 100% right. A lot of the people that I've seen are lost in who they are. And if you go back into childhood and you go back into how they were raised, and the parents tried, and like you said, we can't fault parents for working; they were putting food on the table. But the result of it is that a lot of children lost themselves, especially with peer pressure, especially with having to fit into a society, having to fit into a job. It was this constant expectation that was there for you to achieve, thrive, and fit in. And somehow along the way, you became this person and you never really found out who you were. I actually had a conversation the other day with someone else who said to me, they had no idea who they were when they went to go study. And as a result, they were completely lost in this big environment with 300 people in a class and having to fit in somewhere. And they ended up making a lot of bad decisions along the way because they weren't sure of who they are. And it was only about 10 years ago that they discovered this is who I am. And had I known this before I left home, I might have made different decisions.
So how
Um,
do we understand? So how does this journey go for me to understand my subconscious belief system? Where do I start searching inside me, and what questions do I ask myself to get a better understanding of my subconscious belief system?
so we need to be able to question ourselves. Last week I mentioned that the first thing that you do is your wants. What do you want out of life? And list them down. And then question those wants, because a lot of the time we want things that were instilled in us from history, from the lives that we've lived. So for instance, I grew up behind a counter. We had a shop, and my answer was I never want to stand behind a counter ever again. Wherever I go, doesn't matter as long as I'm not behind a counter. So my identity wasn't completely tied into it, but in a way, every decision that I made was based on that fact that I didn't want to end up behind a counter. And for a lot of people, last week I made the example of being self-employed. Or if we take another example, somebody said to me, they want to be in control of their lives. What does that mean? That means that nobody tells me what to do, when to do it, and how to generate my income. I want to be able to do it on my own terms. And when then you have to be able to ask yourself the question, okay, is this what you want? Yes. No, definitely this is what I want. Okay. Are you sure? Yes. Okay. Was any of your parents, family, relatives self-employed? Yes. Okay. How did you perceive those people and their lives? And then they would give an answer. So your answer would be maybe they had a lot more time to themselves, or they had time to spend with their family, or they had time for this. And once you start answering those questions as to why that appeals to you, you look at the reasons why. Because if what appeals to you is the fact that they had more free time and time to spend with family, your real want is free time and family time, not necessarily making a decision for yourself or having nobody control your life. So, where you originally thought that you want to control your own life, you want to be in control of everything in your life, that wasn't the real need or the real want. The real need and the real want comes out when you question those decisions. So, I want this because I saw this person was happier, they had more time to themselves, they were able to give back to the community, they had more money, they had, these are the things that you then look at. Out of those things, when you ask why, comes, okay, so you want more money, you want more free time, you want to be able to contribute to the community, and you want to be able to have family time. That's what you want. It's not necessarily that you want to be in control of your whole life. So those are the things we need to learn to question our answers. So the
Okay, so
first thing is,
so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm leaving it there because that's my homework, and the homework for all our listeners for this week is see what you want, question yourself, and see your questions linked to your original reason why you want those things, or is it for different reasons? Once we come up with those answers, then next week we can take it further to how do we change our cognitions in terms of now questioning our subconscious belief system. So, like I say, this is a homework session for everybody. So, inshallah, what we're going to do is you've
Amen.
left us with this homework for the week. And I was so happy we had those conversations about working and about giving that stability to our children, because the thing is, if we can help our children now be comfortable in the identity of who they are now, then they don't need to go these series of questions and go through it in their adulthood. Or maybe if then they question this, it's just because they've seen something or the world is evolving and they need to maybe just adapt their beliefs, the value system in line of what's happening around them. But it's not so deep as many adults are now finding themselves in this situation. So I'm so happy you've given us two things to see ourselves, but also what we do helping our children on their journey as well. So today we had a double whammy. Thanks so much to you, Sister Razia, and looking forward to our conversation next Monday. And inshallah, may you always be under the mercy and protection of the Almighty. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, that was Sister Razia Sulliman, our happiness psychologist and happiness coach. And let's go for a short break, and then we're going to be speaking to Sister Vicky Ranseli from the Delusa Muslim Women's Forum.